Drive Live Formula One.
Welcome back to Singapore and to the Marina Bay Street Circuit, where we are getting ready for the second practice session of the weekend. The sun has set and the lights have come on around this 3-mile track, and so much so that it actually looks like the streets of Singapore are glowing. Just a few hours ago, under the blazing sunshine, Charles Leclerc in the Ferrari led the way in FP1. This, he says, is one of his favourite tracks. And it was faster than his teammate Carlos Sainz in P2, and then it was the championship leader Max Verstappen in P3. But the next 60 minutes are a very different challenge for the drivers and teams. Humidity has risen by 10%, up to 73% now. It is very warm down here in the pit lane, and these are the conditions that are more representative of what the drivers will face come tomorrow evening's qualifying session. So there's going to be plenty to keep an eye on and to read into over the next hour. And joining me to talk through this FP2 session in the commentary box is our lead commentator Harry Benjamin, former W Series driver Alice Powell, and BBC Sports chief F1 writer Andrew Benson. Guys, the sun has set, the lights are on, it's busy here in the pit lane. But Harry, what did we take away from FP1? Was it just actually a lot of data gathering and, for the rookies in the field, a little bit of learning when it comes to this incredible track?
Yeah, certainly learning, not just for the rookies though actually, but for the experienced hands as well, because a slightly altered layout for this Singapore Grand Prix due to some building work that's going on in the local area. They've taken out 4 corners essentially around the Marina Bay area towards the back part of the track. Now it's a long straight that leads you up to this turn, the right-hander of turn 16, the left-hander of 17, before you then get to the penultimate double left-hander. So instead of going back under the grandstand, that's all gone. So everyone needs to get up to grips with that. But teams are out pretty quickly in the daylight, lots of upgrades to be explored too. But the Ferraris were fastest, as you said, a 1-2 for Ferrari, who seemed to be very competitive, at least on one lap pace once they stuck the soft compounder tyre on. But a street circuit does make the playing field a little more even, and it was certainly tight, less than a second covering the top 10.
Yeah, and Ferrari didn't actually rate their chances coming into this weekend, even though, as I said, Charles Leclerc loves this track. Alice Powell, you've raced here in Singapore, and if you were listening to us earlier on, you'll have heard Alice say that it actually doesn't feel like it's dark when you're in the cockpit. Tell us more about that. Why doesn't it really change much for the drivers in terms of the lights around the track?
They're so bright, Rosanna. The amount of lights around the circuit that are perfectly placed, they are just so light. You do wear on your helmets, there's totally lots of different types of tinted visor, but you will wear a slightly less tinted one as if you were racing in the sunshine during the day. But the lights are just so bright, and to be honest, you're so focused about getting your apexes and you're looking far down the road that you're almost not thinking about that wow, this is amazing. You're racing in the streets of Singapore and it's night time, but it's just due mainly to the lights being so bright. And that was one thing that I was sort of shocked to, was how light it is there. And it's almost a little bit when people say, oh, is it really dark when you go through the tunnel at Monaco? And it's like, no, it's like you're going through a tunnel, not a normal tunnel, and you come out the other side. Your eyes adjust much quicker than the camera. So, but it still adds I think it adds just a bit of excitement, because it's just a great race to go to. It's a fantastic place. You've got the hot weather conditions, and also the fact you're racing under the lights and it's a night race. It just adds excitement. And I think added to that, it's a great circuit for a driver's point of view, which is why many drivers like it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, Alice, it's because when we watch on, us mere mortals who don't get the chance to get into a car's cockpit, we want it to be extreme. We want that tunnel in Monaco to be dazzling. We want the lights to be astounding here in Singapore as well. Andrew Benson, we had a Ferrari 1-2 in FP1. Then it was Max Verstappen, Lando Norris in an upgraded McLaren ahead of the 2 Mercedes. And I'm just listening as George Russell heads out on track on the medium tyres. It was an interesting one. Mercedes not getting right up there in amongst it, but are they just easing into the weekend, perhaps?
Well, I don't know, Rosanna. It's a tricky one. Sorry, my mind immediately went to the argument about the lizards, actually, when you brought up Mercedes.
Oh,
because
the who did or who didn't squish the lizard question.
It seems like it was Fernando Alonso who squished the lizard. The third lizard, if it was the third lizard. the third time we saw a lizard anyway.
So it wasn't George Russell. A lot of people thinking it was George Russell squishing the lizard with his W14 Mercedes car, but it was in fact the Aston Martin. Still trying to get to the bottom of that. But yes, Mercedes, we'll get back to their form, shall we, on track, rather than trying to dodge a lizard here or there.
Well, I think it's just a bit early, Rosanna. They didn't look that great. There was a point where Hamilton was saying, well, where am I going to find 8 tenths from? But then he did find nearly 8 tenths. So classic sort of Hamilton radio communications. Let's wait and see what the qualifying simulation runs, which happen about halfway through this session, show us, I think, Rosanna, before we form any kind of conclusions at all about this weekend.
Keeping your powder dry, I like it. Very wise, as you hear. Sergio Perez heading out on the medium tyre in the Red Bull, closely followed by Carlos Sainz in the Ferrari. FP2 is go. Cars are out on track. I'm going to hand it over to you guys in the commentary box, Harry.
Thank you very much, Rosanna. Yes, welcome back then to the Marina Bay circuit in Singapore. We're now under the lights for free practice. 2 cars out on track already. And for those who wish to do a sync up, it's 58 minutes and 48 seconds remaining of free practice 2. The last practice session for the day for our drivers. Here's how the team and driver standings look for you. Max Verstappen is leading the way with 364 points. His teammate Sergio Perez is on 219. That's a gap of 145. Fernando Alonso is third with 170 points. Nice battle still developing with him and Lewis Hamilton, who's behind on 164 points. Then comes Carlos Sainz Jr. on 117. Charles Leclerc is sixth with 111. Russell, Norris, Stroll and Pierre Gasly round out the top 10. Max Verstappen cannot clinch the driver's title this weekend. He can do so in Japan at the moment. All being well on Sergio Perez's front, it's looking most likely in Qatar in a couple of races' time. Over in the Constructors' Championship, however, Red Bull, with their 310-point gap at the top of the standings, could seal the title this weekend, but it does require them to have a 1-2 finish, fastest lap point, and even with all that, they still need the 2 Mercedes to basically not score any points, 1 point or less. So likelihood Red Bull will clinch it is in Japan, but this is a street circuit, never say never. Mercedes are currently second in the Constructors' Championship. Then come Ferrari, who after their podium with Carlos Sainz and their 3-4 finish in Monza, jumped Aston Martin up into third. Then comes Aston Martin, McLaren fifth, Alpine, Williams, Haas, Alfa Romeo and Alfa Tauri, the 10 teams, all who have scored points, but Alfa Tauri languishing down at the bottom with just 3 points to their name. Okay, that's how we are all running in terms of the standings, but now we focus on the track action. Logan Sargent is on lap at the moment, and everyone out there on either the medium compound tyre or the hard compound tyre. And Alice, how much has the track changed since FP1 a couple of hours ago? We were in the daylight, first bit of track running in a year for the F1 cars here around this circuit. Lots of dust offline. What's it going to be like for this session?
So there has been a GT session out in between FP1 and FP2, which would have cleared the circuit a little bit. Having a little look at Logan Sargent as he goes round the track, there doesn't seem to be any mishaps in terms of the GT drivers dropping fluid, where there was a slight issue with that, I think, last year. Certainly for when I was out there. So all seems to be like there is less dust. There's a few cars queuing into the last corner, but certainly online there seems to be less dust. Last year, track evolution between free practice 1 and free practice 2 was only around about 4 tenths, so the gain wasn't that big. So we'll have to have a look during this session to see if that changes at all, but at the moment I would say the track certainly looks a little bit better, Harry.
Yeah, track evolution is definitely high as we ride on board with Lando Norris as he comes over the Anderson Bridge and into the hairpin of turn 13, then along the Esplanade Drive straight that approaches the braking zone of turn 14, then into the right-hander, and now we're approaching the new straight that's been introduced, where we've cut out the Marina Bay part of the circuit. Sparks flying in front of Norris from the car in front as it bottoms out, as it goes over a little dip. We go past the grandstand that the cars used to head under, so still going straight before you then get into the braking zone of the 16-17 chicane, and then round the fast double left-hander to see off the lap. Pit lane to your left as the cars scream through and under the Singapore Flyer Ferris wheel, which watches on. Lando Norris crosses the line to go fourth fastest with a 1:35.5 on that hard compound of tyre.
Yeah, not a bad lap time, I would say, from Lando on the hard tyre. Perez has just jumped to the top, and literally, as I said that, up goes Carlos Sainz, who was pulled out a good 9/10, which is now over Max Verstappen. And we're seeing a little replay of Max, getting a little bit boxed in by a Haas, a Ferrari, an Alpine, down there into that final chicane. So I expect we might end up hearing,
it's playing dodgems.
Yeah, we might hear a little bit of angry onboard radio at some point, or maybe there was just too many swear words. We're unable to play it. So Sainz at the top at the moment from Leclerc, but he's leading Leclerc by 3.5 tenths. So pretty handy lap there on the medium tyre.
Yeah, it is, but getting a bit tasty out on track while the cars try and jostle for position. What's it like down in the pits for you, Rosanna?
Well, do you know what, Harry? While they're getting a little bit close for comfort out on track, even before Max Verstappen took to the track, he encountered traffic. He got held up in the pit lane because Charles Leclerc was having trouble manoeuvring his Ferrari into the pit lane, the fast lane of the pit lane. So Max had to wait there a little bit as well. So he's being held up a little bit this evening. He'll be hoping he can make some good progress for the rest of the session.
Absolutely. Well, Red Bull amongst many of the teams bringing upgrades for this weekend. Red Bull, new floor, rear wing. Mercedes, something for the front corner. Ferrari got a new front wing on there. Aston Martin, work on the rear corner. McLaren bringing a huge upgrade as well. Pretty much everything being changed from front wing to sidepod to engine cover to the floor as well on Lando Norris's McLaren. They split their upgrades and so far in FP1, at least, Norris was showing some good pace. Alpine as well, some new bits and bobs to the side pod, the cooling vanes. Williams, the new front wing. Haas not bringing anything, but we're expecting a major new car design for Austin as they try and, to quote Nico Hülkenberg, give them an early Christmas present in their search for a better performance in 2024. Alfa Romeo as well, it's the new upgrades at floor, mainly a new floor for them, and Alpha Tauri as well with a lot of upgrades for Yuki Tsunoda and Liam Lawson. So lots of bits and bobs, Alice, for the drivers to get to grips with and to find that performance as we get into the first of the long haul races that see out the rest of this year. But of course it's tricky when you bring upgrades to a track like this, isn't it? Because you bring them all this way, and if they don't work, well, that's, it's money wasted, but also so easy to make a mistake around here and find the wall.
Yeah, it's the walls come up you thick and fast, and we've seen plenty of times throughout the years racing here that one small error, whether it being your fault, whether it being someone else's fault, and that could mean you're heading into the wall doing significant damage. So that is a big risk for the teams to bring the upgrades here, as Lance Stroll now pops up in the Aston Martin into P3. Nearly 6 tenths off the two Ferraris. Norris, he's gone purple in the first sector on the hard tyre, which is pretty impressive, seeing that most of those, actually all of those in the top 10, are on the medium tyre. But it certainly is a risk. It does play a risk, but the teams feel it is appropriate to bring them here, otherwise they wouldn't bring them here, because then they can carry them on to Japan. There's several drivers like Oscar Piastri, who doesn't have all the upgrades going onto his car, but he will, if they work well enough, will go onto his car for Japan, as now Alonso jumps to the top of the times.
Yeah, it was a really good lap by Fernando Alonso. Goes fastest by just shy of 0.2 of a second. This is the sound once again of Lando Norris, who comes across the line. He's on the hard compound tyre still, slots into 5th. Alonso is currently fastest them on the medium, ahead of Sainz, Leclerc, Russell, then Norris. Stroll, Hamilton, Hülkenberg, Sargent and Verstappen the top 10. Perez, Magnussen, Lawson, Albon, Ocon the top 15. Tsunoda, Bottas, Piastri, Zhou and Gasly, the 20 drivers who are all out on track at the moment, as Sergio Perez gets about 0.5 tenth behind Fernando Alonso. Perez in that Red Bull going second at a track He certainly has some great memories with winning this race last year, but time's changing all the time as Carlos Sainz finds over 6.5 tenths of a second with a 1:33.3 goes fastest. What can his teammate do? Though round the final corner, can't quite pip him. Leclerc slots into second with about half a second behind Sainz. So Ferrari, Alice, once again continuing to show some good form off the back of FP1. Here's Albon first.
I lost a lot of power coming through the last corner. No, it's still engine problems.
Yeah, completely stop right. I need to box this lap. Box this lap.
Okay, doesn't sound good then for Alex Albon in his Williams, running a special livery this weekend, and Albon playing down Williams' chances off the back of finishing in the top 8 in back-to-back races with some engine problems there as he teeters his way back to the track. But coming back to Ferrari, Alice, I mean, off the back of let's be honest, it wasn't a win, but it was. We all won because we got to witness a fantastic fight between Carlos Sainz and Charles Leclerc, but also Ferrari leading for 14 laps in that race and keeping Verstappen behind. I feel like we saw a new edge to Carlos Sainz that maybe we haven't quite seen before, and I feel like it's so easy in that aspect to think Leclerc is the de facto leader, but it doesn't seem to be the case.
No, I mean, okay, it's only been a couple of races where we've sort of gone, wow, is this the new Carlos that we're witnessing here? But at the moment, his performance so far in this session, certainly half a second clear of Charles, but we don't know. There could be traffic. I think you have to go down to the qualifying performances. Obviously, Sainz had a very, very good qualifying performance and a race performance personally at the previous Grand Prix in Italy, but Charles was right there, wasn't he, all over the back, and they were battling for that podium position. So it's hard to say. Charles will still say, hang on, no, I'm certainly still the lead driver, but I think you need a pairing like this to push each other along. Okay, Max will say, well, I don't need anyone to push me along, and clearly he doesn't, but it's always nice to have two drivers in a team that are pushing each other along, because that almost can bring the best out of the drivers. So again, you could say that Max doesn't need anybody, and I think looking at Max at the moment, you certainly don't need anybody unless you want to say, well, actually Perez is performing way under what he should be, which I kind of think he is. I think Sergio should be performing much higher compared to what he's performing at the moment. He's under a lot of pressure, rightly so, because he is in the best car. He's on the grid without a doubt, you know, and Max is showing what that car can do. He knew coming into that seat that it was going to be difficult to have that seat, but he hasn't really stepped up, and I was hoping to see on the second half of this season, after the summer break, that we were going to see a new Sergio. We were going to see someone that was going to come along and really challenge. He had not a bad time out at Monza during the race, but I think in these next few races, we've got Singapore, which is a good track to him, we've got Japan, and then we've got some races coming thick and fast towards the end of the year. Now is the time for Sergio to sort of stamp his just say authority, but really show what he can do.
Last 5 wins have come at street tracks for Sergio Perez. Winner here last year. 250th Grand Prix start this weekend as well for Checo Perez as Hamilton comes along the line 5th and splits the 2 Red Bulls. How do you see that Red Bull situation playing out? Perez has a contract for 2024. I don't see that in any jeopardy right now, because the AlphaTauri situation, as we just get another look at Lance Stroll having a touch against the wall over the Anderson Bridge into the left-hand hairpin, and just runs out wide and hits the wall with the front right and a rear right tyre, and takes a little chunk out of the advertising hoarding for good measure. Lock up for the Ferrari. I think that was Charles Leclerc, manages to get it turned in though. So a bit of action there for the last couple of corners. Do you think what do you think the Red Bull situation is going to play out then as? Because they've got this Ricardo, Lawson, now Tsunoda situation going down at AlphaTauri. 3 does not go into 2, but it certainly buys Perez another year, do you think? Because Ricardo is injured and Lawson is a rookie.
Yeah, it does. I think you're right. It could buy him, buy him extra time for that reason only. Nothing to do with his performance on track. I think that next year, if he is there, which he's likely, obviously he will be, but saying that, you don't know Red Bull, do we? We know what they're like. So that he then needs to really step up and challenge Max next year. Otherwise, he'll be quickly out the door, because that Red Bull wants someone up there challenging. Okay, they've got a good gap in the Constructors' Championship at the moment. When they're lucky that they've worked hard and done a great job, but they've got the car that can allow them to be that far ahead in the Constructors. But as we saw in 2021, when it was really, really close, you need a strong driver pairing, because the teams obviously care about the Drivers' Championship, but it's the Constructors that gives them the money, that gives them the edge, that all the manufacturers, they want to be the Constructors World Champion. It's great for the drivers having the Drivers' Championship, but from a team's point of view, that's the Constructors that they want. And if times change in the next couple of years and a team closes up to Red Bull, they're going to want to have a second driver that's there getting them the points. And at the moment, Perez has not really been that one at times, has he? So we'll see. I think, like, you might be right, Harry. He's been bought time because of the whole situation with that's going on at AlphaTauri with the drivers there. But I wouldn't feel too comfortable if I was Perez, because we just know what Red Bull are like. I mean, look what happened to Nick de Vries, and I think it was unfair what happened to him personally. I think he was kicked out unfairly. He's a rookie. We've seen rookies step in that have struggled a lot more, like, say, Sargent compared to Albon. But as we see Max Verstappen doing some weird burnouts on the exit of the corner there.
Did he touch the wall?
I'm not sure.
We'll have to get another look at that. So it's coming through over the Anderson Bridge, then into the left-hander, the hairpin. And we just caught the rear end of Verstappen absolutely stepping out of place and then violently swinging back straight. He's slowed down dramatically. He's carried on, though.
He almost slowed down, didn't he?
Here we
so
go.
We're going to have a look at a replay. So we're on board with him as he comes through the left-hand, a very tight, narrow section. He's going to turn in, so he gets a little bit of... Yeah, so he's got a little bit of oversteer mid-corner as he comes into 13.
Unboxing.
Understood. Box.
So it's very tight and narrow going through 12 into 13. He's got a little bit of oversteer as he's turned in, which has ended up turning into some understeer. And then he's gone for the throttle, and it is literally just lit up the rear wheels on that Red Bull. And from that radio message, it clearly sounds that he's not particularly happy. He's not the sweary kind of Max we've heard.
But that's the first time I've heard Max sound a little bit genuinely concerned.
Yeah, unboxing. He's and I feel like I wonder if that's a little bit of a statement from Max, spinning the rear wheels up there going, I'm not happy with this, guys, unboxing.
Yeah, it sounded like something was wrong with the car, didn't it? Whether it's something that he doesn't like in the handling or it's actually a technical issue, I guess we'll find out, although Red Bull are not exactly the most forthcoming when it comes to revealing that sort of information.
No, well, he's carrying on and he's going, and he's already come into the pits, actually. So I just, that when you go over the Anderson Bridge, the one thing I just keep remembering, I think it was back in 2012 during the race, Bruno Senna in the Williams and Felipe Massa in the Ferrari going side by side, and then Massa on the left-hand side, which then became the inside for the hairpin, going absolutely sideways as they came into the braking zone during the race, and then managing to get the car straightened up, hold the position, and take the position away from Senna. Get real tight and tasty racing over that Anderson Bridge as Leclerc just comes through the scene of Verstappen's spinning of the rear wheels and continues on. He's on a very quick lap at the moment as the sparks fly. So Leclerc looking to take away the fastest lap time at the moment, which goes to Carlos Sainz on a 1:33.2. He's currently in the pits. In fact, quite a lot of the cars and drivers are back in the pits. Let's just see where Leclerc goes. He does go fastest, 2.5 tenths in front of his teammate Carlos Sainz. Yeah, very good lap. Tsunoda, third, half a second. Fantastic from the Japanese racer in an AlphaTauri that's brought lots of upgrades this weekend. But as I say, the majority of drivers in the garages, including the two Williams cars of Logan Sargent and Alex Albon. And I think Rosanna's outside.
I certainly am, Harry. Logan Sargent only recently coming back into the pits, but Alex Albon's been in for quite some time, since we heard him on the radio talking about a loss of power. And he's now got out of the car. The team were telling me that actually it was all okay, and it looked like he was going to be getting ready to go back out. But suddenly all the umbilicals got detached. He got out of the car, and now the front wing is coming off. Alex is headed to the back of the garage, and the team are having a little look into things. So maybe something a little more sinister than they first thought.
It's been a tricky time for Aston Martin, hasn't it, over the last couple of races? Obviously, a mega start to the year. They're looking for their 16th consecutive point scoring race, if we're going by the PR, what they're putting out there. But Fernando Alonso managed to get back onto the podium in Zandvoort, but then only 9th in a very anonymous race in Italy, and his teammate Lance Stroll with a disaster of a weekend where they just did not have the pace compared to those ahead of them, and it's seen them fallen behind, well, firstly Mercedes and now Ferrari in the constructors. So Aston have found themselves in a bit of bother here, because that amazing start has seemed to be unsustainable for them to be able to hold on to.
It has, and they'll be obviously extremely disappointed, because at the start of the year we were saying, wow, look, we're going to see Fernando grab a win after waiting so long to get a win. Are we going to see him back on the top step of our podium? He still feels, after his radio message from the Italian Grand Prix, that a win is no, it wasn't the Italian. What was it on the radio that he said that he come in and said that
After getting the podium in Holland.
Holland, that's the one. That he feels, a win's around the corner, and then they just struggled a bit, didn't they, at Monza? So they've certainly fallen back in the race for developing the car. So it's a big shame for them. He's sitting 4th at the moment, but it's disappointing for them, because they've still got a long way to go, I personally feel, to try and close the gap and get that consistency with the comparing to the likes of Ferrari and Red Bull.
Yeah, well, as it all goes quiet out on track, Aston Martin and Mike Crack are setting themselves some big ambitions. They want to beat Mercedes and Ferrari to second in that constructors, but really they need both cars scoring points if that is the case. And while one car in the hands of Fernando Alonso is doing an exceptional job, the other of Lance Stroll is not. 11th and 16th the last 2 race results. Before that, 10th and 9th. When you look at Alonso and a brilliant start to the year, but 7th, 9th, 5th, 2nd, 9th, bagging points that Aston Martin so desperately need in this fight. They're not going to be able to get Ferrari if Lance can't start scoring points.
Well, exactly. It's that's what I mean.
We've been here before. Son of the boss.
Yeah, no comment. But that's what I was on about when I said that you need 2 strong drivers there. It's hard. Very rare do you see that teams are pretty happy with their lineup in terms of having 2 very strong drivers. We've got some at Ferrari. We've got them at Mercedes with Russell and Hamilton. But it's difficult. It's not particularly easy to have that very strong lineup, and it's pretty silent out on track at the moment. No one's feeling a need to go out as all the cars are in the pits.
Everyone. So Charles Leclerc then is fastest ahead of Sainz. Tsunoda popped up into 3rd ahead of Alonso. Russell the top 5. Perez, Hamilton, Lawson, Verstappen, Norris at the top 10. So 2 AlphaTauris in the top 8. Stroll, Bottas, Gasly, Ocon, Hulkenberg the top 15. Sargent, Piastri, Magnussen, Zhou and Alex Albon, the 20th and last of our drivers. And we can get some news on Albon, Rosanna.
Yes, just as his teammate Logan Sargent heads out onto track, unfortunately, it looks like Alex Albon won't be coming back out on track this evening. A suspected power unit issue, which is what we feared it might be, I think, when we heard him complaining over the radio. The team are now having a good old look at the car, but it's power unit related, which means this could be the start of some reliability issues. We've got quite far into the season, and of course this track and these conditions make things all the more harder as well.
Yeah, as his teammate, as you rightly say, Rosanna, is ready and raring to go, but that will be cause for concern down at Williams and Mercedes as well, who supply the power unit to Albon. But reliability on the whole has been pretty good this year. There's been, I think at one point we were the most amount of races with all drivers finishing and reaching the checkered flag. So from that aspect, it's been pretty impressive.
Yeah, it has. It certainly has been impressive compared to what we saw last year from a few teams that had a lot of issues. But we're just seeing now.
Can I just stop you there on reliability? So they're allowed 3 engines for a season, right? Or they increased it to 4 now. I can't remember.
Yeah.
Well, each individual unit, but yes, yeah.
So half the field has already used 4 power unit elements, and there's a third of the season still to go. So let's wait and see before we make any bold predictions about how good reliability.
Well, no, it's been good, but up until this point.
Well, has it though? Because if you've
In
got
terms of them breaking down on
if you've got
track,
4
then-
engines per season, then you sort of basically use them each one for a quarter of the season, and they're already all on 4 engines, or half the grid's on 4 engines. And don't forget, Ferrari had a grid penalty very early in the season because their reliability was really bad, to the extent that Charles Leclerc needed a new engine for the second race of the year. So, and also Haas have already used 5
they've gone
engines. So let's hold our horses on how good reliability.
Well, no, come on. I'm not saying there's been no reliability issues. Of course there has been. But in past seasons, we've seen way more DNFs during a race, way more engines going up in smoke.
I think this is worse than before.
Really?
Yeah. Not before.
Yeah,
but
well,
last year, I reckon these numbers were lower
Okay.
at the same stage of the season.
I mean, I do agree that the next 8 races are going to be very telling, because we before the race we get sent the technical delegates report, which tells us exactly how many internal combustion engine units, MGUHs, MGUKs, all the things that make up the power unit, the engine in these Formula One cars, and they are allowed 4 bits of each. That what has been increased from the start of the year. And there are suddenly increasingly more and more red numbers coming up, which means they've gone over their allocation. But everyone always goes over their allocation.
Yeah. I mean, was it Monza that we got loads of penalties last year? What was the race that we got loads of crazy penalties? Monza and Spa.
It's usually Monza, yeah.
Or Spa. It's Spa because
we got some at Spa
Verstappen
as well,
was coming back from 14th on the grid, wasn't he, in Belgium, and it was all because you take it there because you could overtake there, can't you? So I'm not saying reliability, the car's been bulletproof, but well, let's wait and see what the rest of the year holds. But it is getting into danger territory, and that will certainly spark some concern down at Williams for sure, who with Alex Albon complaining of some power unit issues. So he is very much in the pits. But we have, after a bit of a lull on track, got some cars back out on it. The Ferraris going fast and faster still. Leclerc currently fastest ahead of Sainz, but Leclerc fastest of anybody in the first 2 sectors. Sainz also on a good lap. Sainz will come across the line first as he heads round the final 2 corners and across the line under the lights, and he does find time, nearly 8.5 tenths of a second. So fantastic work for Sainz there. On the soft compound of tyre is Sainz, as is Leclerc. So those coming out, putting the red rubber on, the softest rubber, using the softest compounds that Pirelli have this weekend. Interestingly, Leclerc not finding time in that final sector. 1800ths off.
Yeah, still pretty close, as we're seeing the quali times now 1:32.1 from Sainz, and the fastest in the previous session by Charles was a 1:33.3. So certainly a bigger track evolution compared to last year. Majority, well, all the top 6 now have set their time on the soft tyres. Lewis Hamilton gets a little bit of understeer there going through that final part of sector 2 through 12, now into 13, as he's going to foot to the floor, open the DRS, steam down the straight. You come up the hill slightly, down the hill, under braking, gets the car stopped, just has to wait a little bit with the throttle there, and now comes through turn 15, where you used to hang it to the right through the old section, but now it's down into 16 and 17, which is that, and that's a tricky corner. It looks like a simple one from riding on board, but that at turn 17, the track drops ever so slightly, and you do have to be patient there, otherwise you'll end up sailing into the wall with just a bit eagerness on the throttle. But that boosts Hamilton now. He's 4.5 tenths off, sitting there in 3rd place.
Yep, the 4-time Singapore winner crosses the line. This is the sound of Logan Sargent coming into the final 2 corners, and as he turned into the left-hander, nearly lost the car, and he had a big snap on that Williams. Just about managed to save it by going into the runoff area as well. One of the Haas cars just having a slight kiss of the wall too, but no major damage done to the wall or the Haas, and it keeps on going. Kevin Magnussen up in 6th on that soft compound of tyre. Sainz leads this P2 session with Leclerc, Hamilton, Alonso, Norris the top 5, Magnussen, Bottas, Lawson, Stroll, Tsunoda the top 10, Russell, Perez, Verstappen, Gasly, Ocon the top 15, Hulkenberg, Sargent, Piastri, Zhou and Albon stuck in the pits with a suspected power unit issue down in 20th. Cars coming out of the pits are sticking the soft compounder tyre on and doing a bit of a quali simulation with the half an hour remaining on the clock as it gets ever darker here at the Marina Bay Street Circuit in Singapore. George Russell, personal best in the first sector, still just over a 10th and a half off the overall best. And when you raced here, Alice, obviously a podium in the W Series, we always talk about this is such a hard, demanding track, but what is the hardest part of this track? Is there a particular section, sequence of corners that is just, you're thinking about that throughout the lap and you're going, right, okay, I've got to gear myself up for that?
I would say, personally, the hardest part on the track was that 10, 11 into 13, where we saw Max Verstappen come on and he came on the radio and was upset of the issues he had with his car through 13, but going into 10, it narrows up on the exit. It's very dusty and it's sort of off camber midway through that corner as well. So if you just run slightly wide, that then really upsets your car positioning for 11. And again, on the exit of 11, it drops off even more so off camber, but it also really tightens up on the exit there. And then going through 12, you're then braking on an angle into 13, and it's bumpy as well. So I would personally say that is the trickiest section because you've got everything. You've got off camber, you've got it narrow, you've got it bumpy. The curbs aren't the easiest to use through there too. And certainly when it rains as well, it's ultra tricky through there too because, again, there's only really one line, and if you make that small error and it's narrow on the exit, you're sailing into the wall. There's actually not too much standing water there. A lot of that is down the straight between 5 and 7.
Okay, interesting.
Where would you say?
Well,
you played it on a
with my experience,
game?
I have played it on a different console actually. Other consoles are available, of course. And I've probably done exactly what Logan Sargent has done. I haven't had any experience with this track, and he's raced it on the F1 game. I always found, actually, oddly enough, the section that's been taken away, where you go back under the grandstand, trying to get it turned in to the left-hander, not clip the wall on the inside, then not float out into the barrier. I've done that a fair few times on the game.
Just press restart, yeah?
Well, on the F1 game, you get those flashback things, so you can pretend like it never happened. So that's what I do. Also, I don't do gears, so it's fine. No wonder my racing career never quite took off. 27 minutes and 24 seconds remain of this free practice 2 session. Majority of the cars out on track. In fact, all of them are, bar Alex Albon, who's got power unit issues, but everyone out there on the soft compound of tyre. Nico Hulkenberg on a quick lap at the moment, further down in that Haas, which has not got any upgrades this weekend, but expecting a B-spec car, essentially, for Austin. To try and gather as much data as they can towards the end of the year in preparations for a new concept of car for them in 2024. If you weren't with us for FP1, the news, some driver market news, Zhou Guanyu reconfirmed alongside Valtteri Bottas for another year at Alfa Romeo, which would of course not be Alfa Romeo. They will be leaving that team, which I think it's not confirmed, but it should probably revert to Sauber, who are the team that run it and the operation of which it's run out of, in preparation of the Audi brand coming in and acquiring a majority stakeholding in that team to run as the Audi Formula One team in 2026. So Zhou gets another year, which I think we had this discussion in FP1, didn't he? I think it is fairly justified. I don't think we can say he's outright stellar fast, but he doesn't usually put a foot too wrong. He's pretty close to Valtteri on occasion. And who are the other options going to be?
Well, yeah, we touched on some of the other options maybe in the junior category, and I am a fan of seeing drivers from the junior categories come up if they deserve it, of course. And Formula 2, I would personally say, has been one of the most competitive years that we've had in Formula 2 so far. Certainly a strong driver grid out there. Formula 3 has been very competitive as well. Any of you that watch it will certainly know. So I would have liked to have seen maybe them try some younger drivers stepping up from F2, but as we touched on already, he's done a great job, hasn't he, in the Guan Yu Zhou. So I'd say he certainly deserves it, but again, Andrew touched on there's plenty of other political side that goes on with it, with the money he brings. But I don't feel as bad if he then, let's say, has done a pretty good job.
Now, I don't want to dredge up the point again, Andrew, on reliability, but our producer has sent me some statistics, so that's all. We're already in dodgy ground here. But in terms of DNFs, and our discussion earlier, if you're just joining us, how I believe that in the years gone by, this season has not seen as many DNFs or reliability issues within these cars as we have seen throughout previous years. And so I've got some numbers. In 2020, there were 55 DNFs across the season. The same again in 2021. 70.
Hang on.
Yeah.
I'm just going to roll back and let you
I think we're labouring a
this.
point that's not that relevant here, but I just want to say, what were these DNFs caused by?
That's a good point. A mechanical
unless you can
issues.
tell me, but are they? Do you know that, these stats, for sure?
Yes, I do.
For sure?
For sure.
They're not accidents or driver error or...
I'll come back to you on that one.
Okay,
Some might be driver
park
error.
this for now? just let it go, Harry, okay?
But I just think...
I disagree.
Fine.
It doesn't matter.
Yeah, fine.
It doesn't matter.
Fine.
The end.
The end. It's
Can
done.
I just say what I think is interesting, more interesting than reliability?
Is it the lizards?
Verstappen is only 7th fastest and Perez is only 8th fastest. And I'm not saying anything at this stage, but if you start the Singapore Grand Prix 7th, you're not going to win it, even in a Red Bull.
No? Very true.
Just throw that out there.
Yeah, and well, Verstappen's never got pole here, never won here. You'd think it was a fairly clean-cut thing that he would achieve that this year, because of course he hasn't always had as dominant a car as he had done in previous seasons' time. And Verstappen had a tough race here last year as well. Had to fight his way back through the pack, and his teammate took the race win. So the two Red Bulls down in 7th and 8th. Let's hear from one of them, Perez.
It's not coming, mate. Every braking zone, I feel like I'm gonna crash. The really just stepping out massively.
So that's really interesting, because that's exactly what Verstappen was saying in the first session, oversteer, and it's exactly what we saw from Verstappen coming off the Anderson Bridge earlier in this session. So, okay, it's Red Bull, they've got the best car on the grid by a mile, but today in Singapore, it looks like they do not have that car dialed in for the track.
Right now, after the first two practice sessions, it's Ferrari who have the advantage on pace, on outright pace. Sainz and Leclerc topping the session right now in front of Alonso, Hamilton, Norris, the top 5. So lots of upgrades on that McLaren, proving to become fruitful. As it currently stands, Russell 6th, then come the two Red Bulls, Magnussen and Bottas round out the top 10. Yuki Tsunoda in the AlphaTauri is finding pace in that middle sector. He's on the soft compound tyre. He was earlier up in 3rd earlier in this session, and Liam Lawson, his teammate, who's never raced around here, the rookie stepping in for Daniel Ricciardo over the last couple of rounds due to the Australian's injury in his hand sustained in Zandvoort, doing a good job as well. Tsunoda not able to find enough time. He stays 16th, lost a lot of time in that first sector, so Lawson currently quicker than him, who's in the pits, and he's currently occupying 12th. Still, two Williamses in the pits now. Albon, as we've discussed, with power unit issues. Sargent in the pits as well, 19th. Zhou's down there. Gasly. I'll tell you what has struck my eye though, Alice, is Oscar Piastri. It was always going to be tough race for a rookie. Tough track for a rookie to get to grips with, but he hasn't showcased so far in these 1.5 practice sessions that we've had as Lewis Hamilton runs out wide at the end of Raffles Boulevard in the left-hander of turn 5, and then comes a cropper of one of the Red Bulls, and takes a big chunk of curb for good measure too, and has to ruin that lap out of the way. As his teammate comes around the final corner, all out of shape, crossed up. This is the sound of it. You'll hear him light up the rears.
He is lucky. He is, I mean, great car control from George Russell there. And I feel that Carlos Sainz, is he going to get a little bit of traffic? Yes,
Oh,
from a
no.
Red Bull. Which one is that? That looks like Max Verstappen.
Really crashed into this guy.
And that's the problem, that section there, that's the one I was talking about, how tricky it is through there. It's very narrow, and if you do come across with some traffic, and I think it was Max Verstappen who's now being pushed back into the garage because Perez is just going out on his outlap. It is hard to move out of the way.
Well, I think the issue there was coming over the Anderson Bridge. I think it was Verstappen, and I think he did move to get out of the way, but it was almost too late, and then Sainz was going to take that inside line coming into the hairpin to overtake, but they both moved at the exact same time.
Yeah. So it's very difficult, but we've seen people be able to move out of the way a little bit better than that. But again, like you said, I think it was just a bit too late. As Hulkenberg goes through that section of circuit now, traffic free, jumps on the brake. He is 6/10 down at the moment, sitting in 11th place, so 6/10 down on this current lap. As he goes down now through into sector 3, jumps on the brake. You can really see, can't you, the sparks sort of flying out. And that just shows how bumpy this circuit is. As we ride on board with him now, he's going to come through the final corner. You have a little bit of a lift. How brave are you then to getting back on the throttle? He does a much better job than George Russell, who got very, very wide and very sideways, and very fortunate because that could have easily flicked him either left or right, and he would have certainly ended up doing significant damage to his Mercedes.
It's actually worth noting that Nico Hulkenberg's not raced here for a couple of years either, of course. Last here in his Renault days, 2019, as Lance Stroll rides over the exit curb on turn 5. Really pitches the car up. Almost the wheels aren't actually in touch with the ground at one stage.
I feel like if you're going off there, the best thing to do is to just skip straight across it, because otherwise, if you ride it in a certain way and it drops that rear wheel off, it can fire you into the wall. As we can hear Sergio Perez now, who's about to start another run on the soft tyre, as he does sit down there in 8th place. So he'll be looking forward to make gains forward, but actually looking at the mini sectors, Harry, he's not really improving so far.
No, comes through the opening sector, makes his way down Raffles Boulevard towards turn 7 into the left-hander, where we've seen Lance Stroll, Lewis Hamilton in previous laps run out wide, then into the braking zone for the next right-hander.
And actually, if you have rear brake issues, so locking issues, so that could be a number of things. They've got brake bias in the car, which can adjust the bite of the brake. So he's obviously adjusted that and gone far enough forward that he feels that he can. The rake, the springs, all different types of setup changes can affect the rear of the car. But there's nothing worse, really, on a street track as a driver going from 180 miles an hour plus and hitting the brakes and you just not having the confidence in the rear of the car, because that could then send you sideways at any point, whether it be in the first part of the braking zone or the later on down the braking zone. And if you've not got that confidence and it spits you round, you're into the wall. So I'm not surprised that if these two Red Bull drivers are not feeling very confident with the rear of their car, that we're seeing them not really improving in that first sector where the heavier braking zones are. And they're sitting down in 7th and 8th place, as Sergio does go ahead of his teammate now, Max Verstappen, by just under a tenth of a second, if that. So not looking good. And we very rarely do we say that this season, even last season, it's not looking particularly good for Red Bull.
No. 16 minutes, 54, 53, 52 seconds remain. Lots of work going on in the Red Bull garage on Max Verstappen's car as his teammate, as we were just commenting on, comes across the line 7th fastest. Sainz ahead of Leclerc at the moment at the top of the timing screens, and it's Russell, Alonso, Hamilton, the top 5. Norris, Perez, Verstappen, Magnussen and Bottas in the Alfa Romeo rounds out the top 10 in front of Hulkenberg, Lawson, Ocon, Stroll, Piastri, the top 15, Tsunoda, Zhou, Gasly, Sargent and Albon, the 20 drivers, as the lights begin to really shine brightly around this Marina Bay street circuit. The fantastic view from the Marina Bay Sands Resort, the massive building with a 150-metre long infinity pool on the roof, shaped like a boat, which overlooks the Grand Prix track. Rosanna, you haven't escaped over there, have you?
Oh, no, you were painting a beautiful picture of what might have been for my evening here in Singapore.
I hear you've got a room there, though, haven't you?
Oh, if only. We can but dream. The thought of dangling my feet into the pool at the top of the Marina Bay Sands Hotel is definitely what I'd like to make a reality. But alas, here I am in the pit lane. Pretty humid, as you might expect. And as I look out over the start-finish straight, the stands are pretty full, I have to say. Friday night, FP2 session, and the fans have been here all day long as well, when it was baking hot and the sun was beating down. So full commitment from the fans here in Singapore, and they've got obviously front row seats when it comes to looking into the F1 garages. But I've just been looking at some of the track footage showing the sparks coming up from the bottom of the cars, and I know we've got those titanium skid blocks underneath and they often spark, and it's way more obvious because we're racing at night here. But this track is bumpy, isn't it, Alice? And I just wondered, how bumpy does it feel in the cockpit of the car? You know, we've been talking about porpoising in Formula One in recent years, and some drivers still experiencing the bumps. What's the plan in racing?
I mean, it's bumpy for sure. It's not the bumpiest one, as we're actually seeing the Ferrari come down the straight and bouncing away, chipping sparks off the back of the car. But I would say that from what the drivers have experienced in the past, last year, with the aggressive bouncing down the straight, this is actually probably quite nice and smooth for them compared to that. But I wouldn't say personally I've experienced feeling the bumps too much down the straight. In terms of actually on track and parts of the racetrack where you do feel the bumps the most, it's fairly bumpy going into the brakes, down into turn 1, again, which is where the Red Bulls are struggling on the brakes. Turn 5, it's fairly bumpy into there, as well as 7. But actually going through that sort of 11, 12, 13 section, where it is very tight, and we're seeing Liam Lawson now come through that section. As you can hear him, he comes now down into 13. It's really tough there because you're taking the corner flat out in 12, but there's a bump. And if you just happen to hit that bump in the wrong place, there's no room for error there, and you're in the wall straight away. So I wouldn't say it's uncomfortable in terms of a physical sense. It's just a bit uncomfortable if you get it wrong.
Yeah, it's a really difficult track for anybody, even with the most experience. But Rosanna, if you're still there...
I certainly am.
You mentioned all the grandstands are full. From what we're seeing, it looks like it's a proper party atmosphere. Is that right?
Yeah, again, not invited. It's turning into quite a disappointing evening now. You're really rubbing it in. I'm not invited to the Marina Bay Sands Hotel. Not obviously been given an invitation to these glitzy and glamorous parties. Can't think why, given I'm wearing a backpack in sweltering heat with headphones down in the pit lane. Surely I would be a VIP at these parties. I'm
sure it got lost in the post.
Yeah, but you're right though. There's such a glitz and glamour feel to this place, and we spoke about it earlier on in FP1. You know, it's a bit magical. The lights go on, it's a party spirit, and the city really embraces it. You know, a proper street track, and the city comes alive. Although I have to say, it does make getting around a little bit tricky with all the traffic jams, because of course they've had to close.
There is a 11-second gap behind Leclerc in case Alonso starts trying to push you back.
Alonso would never do such a thing.
Oh, sarcasm. Yeah, the traffic's pretty wild around Singapore at the moment, I have to say. No 11-second gaps when it comes to getting home after the sessions.
No, but talking of gaps, you know, they've obviously gotten rid of that section by the Marina Bay area, taking out those 4 corners where you go underneath the grandstand. Have they swapped that grandstand around, or can you just not sit there anymore?
It's still facing outwards, I think. When I was driving over earlier on, I had yesterday actually, it still looks out. So I haven't been out on a track walk or run or amble or crawl. But yeah, I think it's still looking out rather than looking in. But I must check that for you. You might be able to see it from your commentary box vantage point and the helicopter cam. Yeah, well, the camera sort of cuts you away a little bit. So yeah, find yourself a VIP scooter and we can figure that one out.
Go and do some shopping, Rosanna.
Yeah.
I managed to do some of that last year, and there are some great shops around there. So I'll go and spend your husband's money, so that you need a bit of pocket money for being so far away, working in the heat.
Someone pull some strings for me somewhere.
Oh, brilliant. And the reason, if you're wondering why they have cut that bit out, so now we have basically a straight with a slight kink in it from turn 14 all the way to the 16-17 chicane, is that it's a sort of the downtown core area, the historical part of Singapore, and they are building a outdoor multi-purpose venue there in the NS, it's called NS Square, is what they're going to call it. So while that's being built, we can't race on that bit, but I think the idea is it will be reintroduced once the building is finished. So so for now though, we'll see what this new layout brings. The 5th new layout for the Singapore track. So I don't know what the record is, but it's quite a lot of changes for one track. Of course, we had the Singapore Sling through what is now turn 10, which used to always hurtle a few drivers into the wall if you got that wrong and clipped the curb at the wrong angle. Yes, so I think we're enjoying the new layout so far, though.
Yeah, I am.
We won't see the full benefit, I suppose, until the racing.
No, we won't. But actually, we were hearing the onboard there of the visor cam from Fernando Alonso, and I noticed that he was changing his brake bias in between corners. So that's something you can do, doesn't matter what track you're at, but basically it looked like that he was going, I think, forward ever so slightly on his bias and then going back a little bit. So if you're going forward on your bias, it's going to put more bite to the front brakes, and if you're going to go back, it's going to put more bite to the rear brakes. So he was obviously playing around with that in between corners there, feeling that he needs a little bit more bite at the front, some, and not so much at the others.
The two McLarens running a slightly tweaked livery this weekend with new helmet designs as well, not just for those drivers but for a few actually, but McLaren running a stealth mode livery, they're calling it, which still has the papaya orange but intermixed with black on the side pods and running down through the engine cover towards the rear. Running that here and in Japan next weekend as a way of continuing their 60th birthday year celebrations for McLaren. Williams, the other team, running a livery, a Golf livery, with their sponsor, which has been chosen by the fans. So in the traditional orange and light blue colours of the Golf brand, which is always nice to see pop up every now and then in Formula 1. I think McLaren last had that in Monaco, didn't they? So this is the sound of Oscar Piastri slowing down into the right-hander and now heading on to the new part of this track through the left-hand kink of 15, past the old grandstand that they used to head under, and then into the braking zone of the right-left chicane. So easy to carry a little bit too much speed, run out wide and tap the wall, especially in qualifying. We've seen that done over and over again throughout the years, but Oscar crosses the line, doing some race pace running out on that medium compounder tyre.
Yeah, he's not got the upgrades, has he? Well, he's got a couple of them, but he's not got all of the upgrades compared to Lando. We've been able to see some onboard from Lando, and we've been able to see some onboard from Oscar, and actually looking at comparing the two, it does look like to me that Oscar's struggling to get his McLaren anyway rotated, so hence why he's sitting down in 15th place, about 8/10 off his teammate, who's currently up in about 6th place. So maybe those upgrades are working well for Lando, but obviously Oscar hasn't got them, so he's struggling a little bit more. But certainly looking at the onboards, his car doesn't look as pleasant to drive.
I'm impressed by Liam Lawson at the moment. On that soft compounder tyre run, 12th fastest, 1.1 seconds off. Teammate Yuki down 16th. I mean, 1.3 seconds off, so it is tight. But that, Lawson up in 12th, Tsunoda down in 16th. Lawson didn't even expect to be driving a Formula 1 car this year, let alone do the Singapore Grand Prix. One that we've spoken time and time again requires so much preparation. Lawson very much on the back foot with that, and continues to showcase to the Formula 1 paddock his case for a seat next year.
It certainly does. I mean, you could say that there's not a great deal of pressure on his shoulders at the moment. He knows he's handing back to Daniel Ricciardo, so he's got nothing to lose. He's just got to go out there and try and do his best, show what he can do. You could say, well, hang on a second, he's of course got something to lose. He's got his pride, he's got his name, because you don't want to be a driver that falls out of Formula 1 having crashed in all the races and made mistakes and having that kind of name. So in that sense you could say he's got that to lose, but he's doing certainly a really good job, and he had a tough weekend in terms of action being thrown at him and weather conditions being thrown at him at his first race at Zandvoort, and of missing out on the practice session as well. And I thought he did a great job there. So hats off to Liam Lawson, who's sitting well there in 12th place.
I don't think they caught it on the main coverage during the Italian Grand Prix. But Lawson, I've seen clips that have done the rounds on the socials, and Liam Lawson, from quite a way back, sent it into turn 1 to overtake the Haas of Kevin Magnussen, which was, okay, an awful lot slower, but he was coming back by some way, and it got everyone thinking, well, if Lawson's comfortable enough to do that in the car, give him a couple more races and see where he's at. And I think Yuki Tsunoda might be starting to feel the heat a little bit, because at the start of the year we were all praising Tsunoda's upturn in form, you know, having to take a bit of a leadership role within that team after Gasly departed to Alpine. Everyone thought maybe De Vries could take that. That obviously turned out not to be the way, but there's pressure mounting a little bit for Tsunoda towards the end of this year.
It does seem to go up and down for him, doesn't it, with Yuki in terms of the pressure. But I feel that, yeah, he has got a young teammate there, 21 years of age, is Liam Lawson, who's come along, as I said, doesn't necessarily have that pressure for fighting for a seat. Yeah, Yuki may be feeling a little bit of pressure. We don't know the story of his pre-practice session. We've seen a lot of traffic out there. Maybe he didn't get quite a clean lap. But yeah, Yuki needs to try and step up a little bit. But I think the time will tell as well when Daniel Ricciardo steps back in. When he's got a name like Daniel, he's on sort of resurgence up, isn't it? Until he obviously crashed into the wall. So I think that towards the end of the season, maybe we'll see how that all starts to pan out. But the sound that we can hear now is Charles Leclerc on his medium compound tyre, bringing it round to close the lap 6 seconds off the pace that he was doing earlier on. But obviously we're down deep into the race runs now.
Yeah, they're all heading out there on those race runs. Kevin Magnussen on the soft compound tyre though. So he's out there, everyone else on the medium and the hards, with only Alex Albon in the pits with power unit issues, which he's had pretty much since the start of this session. 3 minutes and 46 seconds remaining. Sainz is fastest with a 1:32.1 ahead of Leclerc, Russell, Alonso, Hamilton, the top 5, Norris, Perez, Verstappen, Magnussen, Bottas, the top 10, Hülkenberg, Lawson, Ocon, Stroll, Piastri, the top 15, Tsunoda, Zhou, Gasly, Sargent and Albon, the 20 drivers in this session.
So we have a lot of highlights over the weekend, don't we?
We do.
You know, seeing each other, sitting in a comms box. We get to see Andrew. He's always happy. I get to join in with some great debates between you two. But there's always one thing, chaps, that personally for me is just the highlight, not just of the weekend, but probably of the month. So it's time for this.
Long Run Corner with Andrew Benson.
I don't know, Alice. Dreams one weekend, highlight of the month the next. I'm really getting the
just
awards.
You, mate. It's just you.
So yeah, I think we can say one thing for sure about the race runs is that the medium tyre will be the favoured race tyre. They're nearly all doing their race runs on the medium. Not absolutely everybody. Lando Norris in the McLaren did his first run on the softs, but we'll just ignore him for the moment. But on the medium tyres, Red Bull are still not fastest. The fastest driver over the first 4 or 5 laps of the race run was Fernando Alonso in the Aston Martin, just around around about a tenth of a second on average faster than the Mercedes drivers, Hamilton and Russell, who are almost identical to the 1,000 on an average. And then Sainz and Leclerc in the Ferraris about a tenth behind, and the Red Bulls of Perez and Verstappen about a tenth behind the Ferraris. So Alonso, Mercedes, Ferrari, Red Bull in that order, with about a tenth between each gap.
Oh,
wow!
Wow, indeed.
Could we see Fernando back on the top step of the podium? Well, I told you it's a good point of the weekend, and no one believes me, especially when you come out with bits like that, Andy.
And I think what that emphasises is just how Red Bull are not on their game today. Now, both Max Verstappen, we've got Esteban Ocon really getting as close to a wall there as you could possibly get without having an accident on a replay. both Verstappen and Christian Horner have been saying that this is going to be one of their more difficult tracks. Here's Ocon's radio.
Maybe a spot touch on the left side.
Copy, we'll have a look.
And that they're going to have to be on their game to win. Now, everyone was like, yeah, right, whatever. But it does appear as if, at least today, Red Bull are not on their game. And if you remember, cast your mind back a year ago, both of you, Verstappen had he'd come into Singapore with a run of races where it looked like he could win from anywhere on the grid. He won from 14th in Spa, he won from 7th, I think it was, in Monza, he won from 10th in Hungary, and then he came to Singapore and they messed up qualifying. They called him in when they shouldn't have called him in because they thought he could do a better time, and then he couldn't because there was a problem on the track. So he ended up qualifying down the grid, and everyone was like, oh, he'll still come through and win. And he was like, no, not in Singapore, won't happen. So if he does qualify around about where he is at the moment, that's 8th fastest. Even this year, when Red Bull and Verstappen have swept all before them, even this year it's going to be hard for them to come back from that.
But Verstappen's still going to win on Sunday.
I mean, probably.
After all of that,
those extra few
lovely
tenths.
build up there, and then you've just said that.
I mean, that gives us something to hope for, doesn't it? I mean, there've been FP1s and 2s where, Verstappen hasn't topped them and hasn't looked fast, but you secretly think in the back of your head, yeah, but, they haven't just shown their full cards yet. But the numbers don't lie. Andrew Benson doesn't lie. And there could well be an upset to the order this weekend. Who knows? So very much Alonso looking quick ahead of the Mercedes, the Ferraris, and then the Red Bulls. It's the Ferraris on top at the moment, though.
But going back to Fernando, so he will become the first driver this weekend, providing he gets to the end of lap 25 of this Grand Prix, to reach 100,000 kilometres.
And I believe if he does...
In racing.
Yeah, if he does take the race win, it will be 168 races later after his last Grand Prix win, which would be something spectacular, wouldn't it? His last Grand Prix win in Spain back in 2013. We'll leave that with you there, shall we? Because that's the end of free practice 2, and it's a Ferrari 1-2. Sainz ahead of Leclerc, ahead of Russell, Alonso, Hamilton, the top 5, Norris. Then come the 2 Red Bulls, Perez in 7th, ahead of Verstappen in 8th. Magnussen and Bottas round out the top 10. Hulkenberg, Lawson, Ocon, Stroll, Piastri, the top 15. Tsunoda, Joe, Gasly, Sargent, and Alex Albon with power unit issues confined to the garage for most of that race. 20th and last, Rosanna.
Thank you very much, Harry, Alice and Andrew. Well, there we go. Carlos Sainz leading FP2. Feels like we're back in Monza. He led FP2 and FP3 there, didn't he, before putting it on pole in front of the Tifosi. And if you cast your minds back even further to last year, it was Carlos Sainz and Charles Leclerc 1-2 for Ferrari in FP2 in Singapore. And then it was Charles that took pole. Carlos Sainz slipping down to 4th. So will we see a repeat of that this year? We've already mentioned Max Verstappen's never been on pole here, never taken the win in Singapore. So lots to pour over after that FP2 session. Harry, what is going on with Ferrari? They led us to believe they weren't in the mix this weekend.
Oh, F1, everyone in F1 likes to lead you to believe everything, don't they?
Yeah.
Well, they've got some upgrades. They brought some tweaks to the new front wing for this weekend. Riding high, off confidence, and they're good in corners. Short corners, which Singapore does have a few of, but maybe this is a turning of the page for Ferrari, and Sainz and Leclerc are neck and neck. There was absolutely nothing between them in that FP2 session. But the other half of it is only practice. It could all turn around, and as Andrew mentioned, in race pace, they're behind Alonso and Mercedes. So at least in one lap pace, they're looking quick. Maybe not as quick on race pace.
Well, Andrew Benson, you got us all excited with the long run information and data, and then you just slam a Max Verstappen win out there for Sunday evening. What can change for Max Verstappen? How can he get to grips with this circuit, do you think, in the coming 48 hours?
Well, look, Rosanna, this is Red Bull, and they haven't got 48 hours to come to terms with it. They've got 24 because they've got to change the car before qualifying tomorrow evening, and then the setup's locked in. But this is Red Bull, and this is Max Verstappen. They're on a record-breaking run of 10 consecutive wins. They've won every race this year as a team. of course they're going to make the car better. The question is, how much better? Can they get it up onto, the second row, the front row? I think if he gets it onto the front row, or probably even the second row, he'll definitely win the race from there. Any lower than that, I think it's real jeopardy for Red Bull in this run of theirs. So I think, although you'd be foolish to say anything other than Verstappen's favourite to win, because he's favourite to win everywhere this year. I think for the first time, without wanting to get carried away, it does appear as if they have more trouble than they've had at any point so far this season.
Well, remains to be seen if they can turn it around in time for qualifying tomorrow night. Alice, was it an ice bath for you after a session here in Singapore?
I wish. No, it was just lots and lots of water.
It was a trip to the Marina Bay Sands resort, wasn't it?
Oh, yeah, I wish. Jumping into the pool. No, ice vest on, lots of water, and into the air-conditioned room for me. That was the post-race and post-on-track stuff.
Keeping it simple. I like it. Well, I might go and have a pint of water or two just to cool down after that session. You can join us again for FP3 tomorrow from 10:25 on Sports Extra. We'll speak to you then. This has been an IMG production for BBC Radio 5 Live.